Hello and welcome to Wagner's Tech Talk. Today we're going to take a look at the new RG552 from Anbernic. This impressive device has a 5.36-inch display, which many have been asking for, a more powerful processor, and the ability to boot into Linux or Android. All of these great features come at a price. My goal with this video is to provide you with some answers to help you determine if it's a good fit for you. Let's get started. Here's the box to the RG552, and like most Anbernic devices, the packaging is rather plain. On the side, we have the specs, and speaking of specs, let's take a brief look at some of the highlights. The display is a 5.36-inch OCE IPS panel at 1920 by 1152 pixels with a 10-point multi-touch screen display. The CPU is an RK3399 64-bit hexacore. Thank goodness we're getting away from the RK3326 chipset. The GPU is a Mali T860. It has 4 GB of RAM, and it natively boots into Android and includes a microSD with Linux or Batocera. There are two 3200 mAh batteries which claim to provide about 6 hours, but in my testing I'm seeing roughly around 4 to 5 hours of usage. It does charge very quickly, however. It also has a 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi radio. 5 GHz would have been ideal at this price point, but I was able to use it for streaming, and we'll discuss that shortly, and it performs pretty well. It also supports HDMI output, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and more. Here's a brief look at all the controls on the device and the ports, which we'll take a look at more closely once we get it out of the box, which is right about now. Alright, so here's the device. We'll set it off to the side and take a look at what's in the box. Here we have the USB-C travel charger. The prongs fold up for easy storage when not in use. Under this panel we have a few additional accessories to make note of, such as this USB-C to USB-C cable for charging. Depending on which package you choose, it may ship with a 64GB microSD card with around 4,200 games. The 16GB card is for your Linux or Batocera OS. There is a screen protector included, and a single-page user's manual which covers Linux OS on the left and Android on the right. Also check out my RG552 page at wagnerstechtalk.com, RG552 for other tips. There's also some screen wipes included. And now the star of the show, the Anbernic RG552. The shell is made of plastic, yet it seems to have some heft to it. It is a large device, so let's do a quick comparison of the size of Anbernic's previously released device, the RG351MP. If we overlay the MP on top of the 552, you can see the display on the 552 is almost the size of the 351MP. It's also a much heavier device. The weight is roughly 354 grams. By comparison, the RG351M is 89 grams lighter than the RG552. Another device that I've reviewed, which has essentially the same size display, is the Odroid Go Super, and even that device is 80 grams lighter than the RG552. And for the last weight comparison, the Powkiddy X18S, which is a clamshell design and obviously more plastic, but is still 47 grams lighter than the RG552. On the left-hand side of the device, you have the L1, L2 buttons, as well as an exhaust port for the active cooling that's built into the unit, as well as your mini HDMI, your headphone jack, your OTG, and your DC power input, and your R2 and R1 buttons. On the side, you have the power button. On the bottom, you have your stereo speakers. Your microSD on the left is for your operating system, such as Linux. You have a reset button, a function button, and a microSD slot for your games. On the back, you have 2 rubber grips for comfort, as well as your active cooling fan intake, which you will hear when it's first powered on, but it's mostly pretty quiet. On the left-hand side, you have your volume adjustment. My preference would be for the dial or potentiometer, but it works. All of the buttons are typical high-quality buttons that have been a staple for Anbernic devices, including the L3 and R3 buttons on the sticks. I had no problems with the controls themselves, but I did find the distance to the L1, L2, and R1, R2 buttons to be a bit of a stretch. For example, for a future model, I would like to see stack buttons a bit lower and make reaching those buttons a little bit more comfortable. I wasn't familiar with the Kioxia microSDs and replaced them both with 128GB Gigastone microSD cards instead. If you're interested in doing the same, check out wagnerstechtalk.com/RG552, where I documented how that was done. At this point, I'm going to fully charge the RG552 and we'll take a look at the software side of the device. As mentioned, if you install the 16GB microSD into the left-hand slot of the device, it'll boot into Linux OS. Let's see how long it takes to boot. And it looks like about 15 seconds. That's pretty good. There are a number of emulators and their associated BIOS files and games included if you opted for the microSD card, which included the games. However, locating a single game in a large list may be a little difficult, so I want to provide a few quick tips. For instance, here we have a large list. If I want to filter with a specific keyword, such as donk for Donkey Kong, I can press select and then filter by text and receive a filtered list. If you want to change the look of the device, you can change the theme by going to UI Settings, Theme Set, and ES Theme Carbon, for example. And this is what the interface looks like. When you start up a game, you may see that the aspect ratio isn't quite optimized for the game. In this case, I'll start up Donkey Kong Country and press the Function plus B button to enter RetroArch. From there, we'll go to Settings, and then go to Video, and Scaling, and change the aspect ratio to 3:4 and enable integer scaling. Now when I back out by pressing the function and the B, and yes, there have been a few times I hit the reset instead, Donkey Kong looks much better. However, listen to the sound delay. There's a significant delay, so I brought it into my video editor to see if I could measure approximately how much that delay is. Based on what I'm seeing, that's about a 300 to 400 millisecond audio delay, which is significant. However, if you go to the guide that I mentioned earlier and scroll down to the How to Update section, I have some information here on a guide that was created by someone else that is extremely helpful. You will need a 16 or 32 gigabyte micro SD card in order to perform the update, but we'll go ahead and click here and go to the website. And a huge thank you to Dave C. for this awesome guide and all the links that he's provided. It steps you through the entire process very well. In fact, I did this for both the Batocera and the Android side, and I'll show you both real quickly. I used Raspberry Pi Imager to burn the image instead of Balena Etcher. No technical reason, just my preference. I then inserted and selected the 16 gigabyte micro SD card that I was going to use for burning the image and clicked the right button. Then when prompted that it's going to erase, click yes, and once the image is burned, just click the continue button and close out of the Raspberry Pi Imager. I then booted from the new Linux OS image and all the audio lag was fixed. I'll turn the volume up a little bit here so it's clear for you. I then did the same thing for the Android side of things. The reason for that, there is no Google Play Store, so I used their utility here to be able to etch the image directly to the micro SD card. Click the Create button, and then go ahead and click the Yes button to go ahead and write the image to the micro SD. Again, I was using a 16 gigabyte micro SD card. When it was finished, simply click the OK button, then close out of the Rockchip Update utility. Go ahead and pop in the micro SD card into the RG552 and power it on. The Android update will take about 15 minutes, and as I mentioned, after this update you will now have the Google Play Store, which was originally absent from the micro SD card that I received from Anbernic. Let it proceed, and once finished, simply remove the micro SD card from the device, and the Android operating system will start up. I didn't like all the empty space at the top of the display, so I pressed and held an empty area at the top, selected Launcher Settings, Sections, and Manage Sections. And then from there I just dragged the widgets down to the bottom, and go ahead and click Close, and press the B button to back out. After that, all my tiles and applications were up at the top, and everything looked pretty good. And now we have the Google Play Store and can install whatever native Android applications we want. In the next segment, we'll play some games from both the Linux and Android side of things. I'll place one of these icons in the upper left so it's clear which OS is being used during the game. We'll kick off the Linux gameplay with Sonic Advance 2. And take a close look at this display. It's got to be the best display I've seen on any handheld that I personally own. Now we'll switch over to the N64 and check out Mario Kart 64. There was some slight audio distortion, which wasn't noticeable when running this game under Android. One nice thing about this device is the game microSD card is shared between both Android and Linux OS. Here we have Daytona USA running on the Sega Saturn. Whoops. No, I'm not. Alright, with that, we'll switch over to Sonic Adventure 2 on the Dreamcast. Again, this game played very well. And I love that this device has such a large screen. It's very easy to see, extremely colorful, vibrant display. I really like it. It's probably my favorite handheld at this point. Now we're taking a look at Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories on the PSP. The original audio was removed as it was playing copyrighted music in the background, and I prefer to avoid copyright strikes. One thing that is a bit awkward is the location of the function button. It's very easy to get it confused with the reset button, and my preference would be to see it near the select button, as you will use it frequently to exit a game. The next game we'll take a look at is Chains of Olympus. Unfortunately, only the OpenGL driver is available under Linux, and the performance is not very good. The Vulkan driver is available in Android, and we'll take a brief look at that in a moment. But first, let's see how long it takes to boot under Android. And it looks to be around 22 seconds, which is a little bit longer than under Linux. I think it's about time that we try out the HDMI output from the mini HDMI port on the top of the device. We'll go ahead and plug that in, and you'll see the video feed on the portable monitor here in the background. And we'll use this 8-bit DO dongle with an OTG adapter to connect to this arcade control panel for a little bit of gameplay. The RG552 does not have Bluetooth built in, so you will need an adapter if you want to use a wireless controller. Let's check out Soul Calibur 2 on the GameCube. While it's great that we can now play some GameCube games, the performance is just okay for many of the games. Sticking with the GameCube, we're looking at Mario Kart Double Dash. If you listen closely, you'll hear the motors vibrating as I run over the speed bumps. While Chains of Olympus does play a little bit better under Android, it's really not saying a whole lot. Here we are using the Vulkan driver. However, less graphically demanding titles such as Mega Man Maverick Hunter 10 play quite well. And one of my favorites, Gran Turismo on the PlayStation. I did mention earlier that we'd take a look at some streaming on here. Again, we're using a 2.4 gigahertz radio inside this device, which is not exactly the fastest, but it does seem to perform rather well. This is MotoGP 20 streaming on Stadia. It's a game I've never played until this review, and figured it would be fun to watch me get out quite a bit. Like here. Oh, I can do better than that. Here we go. Okay, maybe not so much. Fun game though. That brings us to the end of another video. I'll provide you with my opinion of the RG552, starting with what I like. It has a beautiful 5.36 inch touchscreen display, probably one of the best I've seen. I like that Anbernic has brought back the HDMI output, which has been missing in some of the more recent devices. It has 4 GB of RAM, which is a definite plus, and it provides the ability to dual boot Linux and Android, which is another plus. And of course, the faster processor of the RK3399 is quite welcome and a definite performance improvement over prior generation of Anbernic devices. It is a quality device, and the display has great viewing angles. Now I'll discuss the improvements I would like to see in a future model. The function button should be more easily accessible and placed on the front and not the bottom of the unit. The top buttons are not as ergonomic as prior Anbernic devices, and instead of a 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi radio, I would much prefer to see 5 GHz. The lack of Bluetooth is rather unfortunate, and priced at $227 US, it is substantially more expensive than prior generations of Anbernic devices. All that said, the RG552 is perhaps the most impressive device I've seen from Anbernic since the initial release of the RG350 a couple of years ago. To provide a little bit of additional context, I've had this unit for about a week, and it takes a lot of time and effort to test it thoroughly, create the guides, and try to find solutions to issues that you may run into. The guide will continue to be improved long after this video has been released, so please comment below if there's anything specific you would like to see in the future. I hope that you find this video and the companion guide helpful. If you did, please click the like button. If you want to see more honest feedback and reviews like this one, please click the subscribe. And with that, I will talk to you very soon.